Hey everyone, this is Kieran from MSK Physio. Today's exercise is looking at developing a little bit of lower back strength along with muscles down the back of our legs. So we're going to be looking at like hamstrings, glutes, all that kind of stuff. But it's a bit of a coordination exercise and something you might start to build some endurance with. If you freshly have back pain, or acutely I should say, then you wouldn't necessarily do this to begin with. But this is a nice exercise to bring in once things have settled down. So when it comes to lower back, I suppose biomechanics, we're thinking about the joints, and those joints and the shapes that they have are going to dictate the movements that bias. And the lower back joints are very much a flexion extension. So they're shaped or facing each other like this, and they allow flexion and extension this way. Now there is a degree of rotation, it's not a lot, but the contribution from each segment as it goes up the whole length of the lower back or lumbar spine does give us some rotation. And we call this lumbopelvic rotation. And it's something that happens when we run or walk or kick or anything where there's like a one-legged type activity, lunges, etc. So this is a thing that is, I see a lot as a flexibility that's lost after episodes of back pain or long-standing back pain. Not to say that range loss is always a cause and effect with ongoing pain or development of pain, but there seems to be a correlation there to some degree. So what we're looking at is the ability for our hips. See how my pelvis can rotate this way? And if you want more information on this, check out our video on lunge techniques and variations. But if I come up into this position, I'm expecting my pelvis to face that way a little bit. Now that rotation, of course, is coming a little bit from the hips, but there's also a degree of rotation of the lumbar spine, because as I'm facing forward, my pelvis and lower spine, or lumbar spine I should say, are facing that way. And so the muscles that do that, to some degree, are the lumbar multifidi, along with some of the iliocostalis and some of the other spinal erectors, but those are the iliocostalis and the multifidi seem to have more of that angle of rotational pull. And then there's smaller ones in between, which are kind of more fine tuners, and we can't really isolate those or any of these muscles for that matter. But what we can do is encourage the rotation component of the movement. And so what we see as an exercise is like a prone straight leg raise. So if I come down into this position and I lift up one leg, so now I'm doing a prone straight leg raise. Could do the other side. And you can see as the higher I go, it's just my leg, my hip to start with. And let's check the other side. So it's just my hip to start with. And as I get higher, my lower back has to extend. And as I get even higher, it has to rotate a little bit. So what can happen if you're not sure about the rotation is you start to see a counter rotation, is people will dump down into the same side as the leg that's rising. And so what that looks like is as I'm lifting the right leg, they dump down into this hip here, creating an opposite rotation. And I want actually this pocket to come away from the ground, so the ability to come that way. Now, if that's tricky for you to do, you can do one of two things. You can either place a prop and raise yourself up, or you can give yourself something to squish on the other side. So if I line this mat up this way, so here, if I put myself maybe like a little towel or something to squish at this hip, then when I come up, I'm trying to squish down over here and I'm gonna get that rotation. Or I can also use that towel, or in this case a yoga block, and we're putting it at the bone, this ASIS, this bony bit at the front of the hip. If I put that just under my hip, what it does now is it creates that rotation of the pelvis. Now my pelvis is rotated towards you guys, towards the right. And so as I lift my leg, now I'm able to get into that rotation a little bit more, but I have the support of the block and it helps me sort of figure out, okay, well, what does that feel like? Now, if this feels easy for you, then you may not need it. But for those that need to re-coordinate it or figure out how to get that flexibility back, this is a nice exercise to retrain that. So I might lift and hold, breathing as always, or I can do reps. Okay? So a subtle movement that, when you've got an asymmetry, so say you have one side that's able to rotate consistently when you're walking, and the other side doesn't have as much rotation, you just end up with a real sort of, I suppose you can get imbalances in strength and muscle size, and then to some degree endurance, just because your range gets lessened over time. Whether or not this predisposes to back pain or further back pain episodes, I'm not sure if that's the causative factor, but it is a range that we're trying to regain after a back injury or pelvic injury. And sort of, Rehab 101 is, can we normalize the ranges, at least back to that person's normal? So if you see that their other side has more and this side doesn't, then you might try and rehab that back at least at a minimum to the other side, and then decide whether or not it's worth pursuing further range on both sides together. But it's very useful if you don't have it to get it. It's very useful to get back if you've lost it. So I've definitely recommend doing this if you've had lower back pain in the past, and just see if one side's harder to get that rotation, and now you've got some tools to sort of remedy that. If you like this video, then please hit like below. Otherwise, to check out more of our content in the future, you can subscribe to our channel by clicking our logo over here, and to check out our latest video, click up here.